Alright guys, it's Morgan from Highland Cycles, and I'm coming to you with the first video of putting Daisy back together. And I put a poll up here on YouTube, and you guys all said you wanted to see me do the shock first. So, we're going to be completely rebuilding this shock. This is a WP XPlor shock, but it does have a bladder kit on it from TBT Racing. Let's start first with why you should run a bladder kit on your shock. A normal, let me put the camera down and I'll show you. Let's start, a couple definitions. This is the nitrogen reservoir, right? So it's called a piggyback shock in general. This is the nitrogen reservoir. On all shocks, it has mostly nitrogen in it and a little bit of oil. And what this is for is while this shock shaft is moving up and down, the piston on it is going through the oil, and that's the valving that we talk about. The piston has shims on it, and as it moves through the oil, the shims either slow down or let it go faster, you know, depending on how you have it valved. But when you hit something really hard and this needs to move quickly, it forces oil through this high-speed circuit here and into the reservoir, and the nitrogen is there to let that oil come in and then push it back into the shock. On a WP shock that's just stock, there's a piston in here. So that piston, as you're hammering through whoops or whatever, a piston's moving up and down like this. And what's wrong with that is that as that piston moves up and down, it's just got O-rings on it. As it moves up and down, what happens is it'll seize in here. It gets hot, right? This gets super hot, and it'll seize and lock up, and then not completely lock the shock out, but like not good stuff. That's why a lot of KTMs, if you watch them go through oops, it handles well, and then starts doing this. And that's because that piston locks out and makes the high-speed circuit not work right. So my personal suggestion is you get a bladder kit for it, regardless of what year, what you do with it, all that stuff. I really highly recommend putting a bladder kit on it. A lot of guys out there say that the bladder kits leak nitrogen and blah. Anyway, in my opinion, that is not true. I've seen foamy oil come out of shocks, absolutely. But if you move a shock up and down enough, if there's any air at all in there, I mean, the tiniest bit, it'll foam. Every other manufacturer, Showa, KYB, they all use bladders, and they don't have any problems with it. So I highly recommend doing a bladder kit for it. So this video is going to be doing a shock rebuild using a bladder kit that's already on this. So let's get started. As with rebuilding all suspension, you want to start by opening all your clickers up and counting where they are. Start with the low speed compression. Then we're going to open up the rebound. And the reason we're opening these all up is that we want the oil, as we rebuild this thing and put new oil in it, we want the oil to be able to flow through all the orifices as freely as possible. I got this cool System Tech Racing adjuster on here so I can adjust it while I'm out there, which I really like, but we got to take that thing off so I can open up the high-speed circuit. The other thing is this thing's super dirty, so I'm going to take the spring off and everything, and we're going to clean it before we start working on it. And with this KTM shock, KTM's decided in their infinite wisdom to put a plastic ring on here, so you really do need the right spanner, otherwise you'll tear that thing up. You can't use a hammer and punch on it, which is kind of annoying because you can do that on every other shock and it doesn't cause any problems. It always ends up being stiff because it's plastic, not aluminum. So I take a little bit of, this is just lube, this is from Muck Off. MO94, I'm not any sure what exactly it is, but it's just a multi-use like lube, so we'll put a little bit of that. So all shocks have some sort of retaining ring up here, and a lot of times it's really stiff, so I like to grab just a small little dead blow, kind of knock that down. There we go. You see, got this ring here. Pull that off. So we'll shine that up before we put it back on. There we go. You can see shock definitely leaking. That's what all that grime and everything is. So actually, I've been heating up the ultrasonic spa, so we're going to go drop this sucker in there, get it cleaned up. But before we do that, we'll go ahead and release the nitrogen. Nice thing about putting a bladder kit on your KTM is it means you can fill the nitrogen with a normal nitrogen thing instead of with the fancy-pantsy tool that's $200. Any off-road shop that has nitrogen can do this, so it's pretty nice. Alright, let's go clean her up. Alright, we got that cooked up pretty good. It's not super duper shiny clean yet, but we're going to take it apart and then we can actually put all of the stuff back in this cleaner and get it really, really clean. So let's come over here and we will get her in pieces. When you're taking any of these things apart, this cap has to come off. That's just like a kind of just a cover to protect everything. So this has already been off a few times, or at least twice. Once to valve it and then once for a service, but it's been a long time, probably 100 hours at least. So we're going to take a punch and go real easy on this. Like if you have a brass punch, that's probably the best thing, but honestly anything will work. Just go easy on it so you don't mar these little holes up. And again, if you do mar the holes up a little bit, it's not the end of the world. It just doesn't look that great. Ugh. Look at this. That's most likely Oklahoma mud. Yeah, that's probably why it's leaking. Oh, we'll get that cleaned up, no worries. Look in there. This is, like that next piece in there is called the seal head. We need to push that down. There's another ring inside there, another snap ring inside there that we got to get out before we can pull this all apart. I like to put it up in the soft jaws like this, and then if you can, take your hand, push down, but this one we may have a bit of a thing, so probably gonna have to clean this a little bit and then probably gonna have to knock that down with a punch. And again, brass punch is best, so it doesn't mess up the aluminum, but again, anything will work. You just don't want to hit the sides of the body or the shaft. So first of all, let's clean that out with some brake cleaner and air. See if that wants to move yet. Not really. So, take our punch. Again, brass is best, but I'm showing you guys what you can do. Just normal stuff, and you really, usually you just need to kind of dislodge it. It's usually kind of just stuck in there, probably from the mud and the stuff. Alright, so it's wanting to move now. Gonna grab our cool guy pick. Check this thing out. This is cool, and you can get these probably from Harbor Freight, or I mean these are from Snap-on, but you can get them anywhere. Like a little spoon. They're cool for getting circlips out of places because it's like nice and smooth that way. You can get it in there and get that sucker out. Hold it down with a screwdriver. Get that guy out of there. And then when you're pulling this apart, it's it's hard a lot of times, especially if it's been on the bike for a long time. So as you're pulling it out, be slow. This one came out easily, which is good because it hasn't been that long. Sometimes though, when you pull this thing apart, oil goes everywhere. So just be careful. Do it in a space where you don't mind oil getting. So there you go. That is what the inside of an XPlor Shock looks like. I'm gonna go take this whole rig. I'm gonna put it in the ultrasonic cleaner and clean that thing up while I take the rest of this apart. One of the things to do, now you got this out, dump this oil into whatever reservoir. I got a sink over here that drains to a bucket. Drain that, ugh. That is some, look at that. I'm not proud of that oil. That's been in there too long. Now, we gotta get this reservoir out, so it should. There we go, push that down, get our pick. There we go. Now we need to get this out because it's got a Schrader valve right here. We just use a tire tool that will hook onto that for pulling valve stems through things. So grab that, pull this properly out. And one of these things, screw it on there. Pop out of there. These can be a real pain sometimes. Gotta wiggle them a little bit. There we go. Whew. Got her. That thing is a tight fit. Now probably if you're doing this on a Japanese shock that already had a bladder, it might not be such a tight fit. Also, on a Japanese shock, sometimes you can't, like the Schrader valve's coming off to the side and you can't do what I just did, and you have to get a big old pair of channel locks or something like that on there. Just be really careful not to mess up the aluminum, right? So, but there we go, got her off. So when you're doing this, I like to take this, kind of squeeze it, like not crazy, and listen. I don't hear any leaks. Everything looks good in here. So now, I'm gonna dump this out and drop it in the ultrasonic cleaner and get this all nice and clean and shiny. So we got the parts out of the ultrasonic cleaner. Now we got to take this apart, right? Because we got to put a seal in here, so you got to take all this off. You want to be really, really careful when you're doing this. Soft jaws, don't want to mar this thing up. If you got them, this happens to be a 22 millimeter. There we go. And that's on there tight because there's Loctite on there, right? And we're going to make sure we go back on with Loctite. Here's my trick for making sure I don't mix any of this up. Because, see, if you pull this up, this will all just come off. But all these shims are loose, and if you get them out of order, the shock's not going to work like it's supposed to. So, what I do is I take just a long, this is an old pick that broke. I just stick it here like this. I come up, put it right onto there, and then boom. That way you got it all in place. Set it somewhere where it's not going to come apart. Pull the seal off on this guy. So you can buy just a whole seal head, and that's a easy, fast way to go for sure, and not a bad way at all. I stock the actual seals, so I don't mess with that. But you got to get this rubber bumper guy out of there, and this washer. And I like to, you know, just keep them all in order. Right there is the actual seal. So pop that guy out. I'm gonna put another one in, and when you pop, every time you pop something out, just make sure when it comes out, you know notice which way it comes out. So I know because I've done lots of them, but like flat side goes down, little groove side goes up. Now on these seals, they've got this little, it's like a little plastic, I don't know, it's like a retainer kind of thing. Anyway, it needs to go in the back side of the seal. It doesn't like to stay there, so I take a little bit of grease, just run that around in there, put that in there, boop, there we go. Drop that down into its home, and you push that down in. So now, got a brand new seal in there, looks good. Now we're going to take our washer back in, little rubber bumper guy, tuck him back in there. He's got like a little lip right there, you can see, and that goes inside the groove that's in there. Just go ahead and take this off and clean it really good, because anything on the inside of here is going to be really close to that seal, and you don't want it to get messed up. Take this bumper off, clean that too. It's got mud in it. All this stuff's going to get muddy again and dirty again, but you might as well put it back together as clean as you can. Keep it lasting as long as humanly possible. Look at that. That's some gnarly mud, so we get that all cleaned out too. Like on fork seals, when I do fork seals, if you haven't watched those videos, go back in our channel, you'll see we do a bunch of fork seal videos. But this shaft is what the seal rides on, and I like to take a little bit of red Scotch-Brite and put a crosshatch in this to help hold the oil on there, make a nice film so it slides good. So, red Scotch-Brite, and put it around there. Just twist it while you're pulling it up. Also, if there's any nicks or anything like that, that'll help get rid of those. Oh, shaft looks good, all clean, happy, shiny. When you're doing this seal, you want to look, there's a bushing inside there. You want to inspect that bushing and make sure it's good. if you need to, you can replace it. We stock those bushings here. Most good suspension shops that have that. This one looks good. And then when I go back together, I like to put a little bit of grease in here to help it slide on. This edge right here is actually chamfered so that you don't have to be too terribly careful. You still need to be careful, but that edge is chamfered so that it should slide on really good. But like I said, always like to have a little bit of grease on there, help that go in. And go nice and easy. There we go. Take our valving. To service this thing, like to do the absolute best job possible, what you want to do is take all these shims and take them apart and really clean inside there. What I like to do is I'm going to blow this out with brake cleaner and then blow it out with air, and that's going to be good enough. A lot of times, you know, if you're going to a real, honest to goodness, like full-on revalving badass suspension shop, that's what they're going to do. At least that's what they should do for the money they charge. But honestly, as long as you get this pretty clean with some brake cleaner and blow it out, you should be good to go. I'll take it. Make sure it's good. Get our air. Hold on to it tight. Don't let it fly everywhere. There we go. And this right here, this is a bushing too. You want to inspect that, make sure it's good. This one looks great. We reversed it how it went back on. We go like that. And it always takes a little wiggling. There we go. Blow this out with some brake clean. We want to make sure it gets nice and dry because we're going to put some Loctite on that. I like to use red because I do not want this coming apart. No. Definitely want to come in here, get the Loctite off the extra surfaces because sometimes that stuff will get places you don't want it and then it'll clog up a hole. So you don't want that. Then I come in here. These shims back where they go. Then we want to Loctite this. A Japanese shock. There's only going to be, there's a nut at the top. This is a little different. This XPlor thing is weird. It's not like, it's not even like other PDS shocks. So it's got a little bit different setup here. But the idea, the whole basis of this video is to give you the idea of what you want to do. So you want to make sure, again, these shims, you don't want them to coming off. Make sure you get that nice and dry. I'm going to take red Loctite. In there. Now the thing is, on a normal shock that's never been apart, there's going to be the nut that comes down, and there's a peening, which means they've driven the edge of the shaft over to keep that nut from coming apart. To get it apart, you're going to have to grind it. Now I didn't have to do that on this thing. If you guys have questions about that, comment below. I can help you out, but you'll know what I'm talking about if you take it apart. You'll see some edges that have been like knocked over by a machine or a punch or something like that. That's why I'm putting Loctite on them now, is because those that would have all been removed. This doesn't have that setup. It's a little bit, like I said, it's a little bit different setup. So get that Loctite on it. You want to tighten it down, but don't. Now it's time to put it back together, and this is where it's going to get controversial, because I don't have a shock pump, because I learned from a guy long ago who's done way more of this than I ever have or ever will, and honestly more than what most people ever have or ever will, is that you don't have to have a shock pump. So don't feel like you got to buy something like that. This is all good to go. We're happy. Now I'm using Maxima shock oil. It's the best stuff I've ever used. There's other really great stuff out there. I don't know much about it. I like Maxima suspension fluid. So this gets messy the way I do it, but it works. That's all there is to it. Pour a little bit in here, and it should go into the other side too. We're going to pour some more over here. Put it in here. Now this is where it gets messy, but again, it works. There we go. It's probably doing this over this tray, but it's easier in the vise. Also easier to show you guys over here. So now, there's a retaining ring in there. Alright, overflowing is a good thing. That means it's full, right? Now, we're going to take our shaft and we're going to lower it down in here. And if you go slow enough, the oil is going to flow through this piston and go around. So it shouldn't go everywhere, shouldn't do anything. So you want to fill it up, not all the way, but get it pretty close. Go nice and slow. And then hear it going down in there. Now with a shock pump, this goes a lot faster. You put this all together dry, and whatever. But shock pumps are like $3,500, or you got to build one yourself, and that's kind of a pain. So I like to do it this way. If you come up and down, if you go slowly, the oil won't go everywhere. And you can hear it. You can't probably hear it on the video, but you can hear it, air coming out of it. You just want to go nice and easy. And there's little air bubbles. All you want to do is you just work it up and down until you don't hear any more air and don't see any more bubbles coming out. Alright. Now, I'm going to take this seal head. We're not done with the bleeding. I'm going to take the seal head, push it down in here. Now, tap that back down. Now comes the rest of the bleeding to make sure you got all the air out. Now, we're going to take the high-speed compression valve out. Like I said, it's messy, but it does not require a shock pump. So you've got two holes. You got that hole up there that goes into the shock body, and then you got that hole that goes into the reservoir. You need to make sure those are both under oil all the time. So it's hard to tell, but if you go nice and easy, you can see bubbles coming out. And because this is the highest point now, the bubbles are all working their way up there anyway. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to even push it all the way in because, like I said, all the bubbles are going up. And every now and then, take your wrench, tap on it, make sure we're getting all the bubbles up there. And then we move it just a little bit up. Got the compression, the high-speed compression adjuster all back in, and low-speed adjuster anyway back in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to charge this with nitrogen. We're going to put 150 pounds in it. That's what I like. This is, like I said, this is off Daisy, our rental 250, which is going to become just my 250. So 150 pounds in here. The nice thing about having, the Bladder kit is that you can use just a normal regulator to put gas in it. This thing down. Again, if you don't have nitrogen, hopefully one of your local off-road shops or local motorcycle shops will help you out. If you do all the rest of this work, then hopefully they'll be cool enough to give you some nitrogen. Here at Highland Cycles, I just charge it. I don't charge anybody for the nitrogen. It's so cheap for us to get it that I don't worry about it. I'll do that. So we got to make sure we got everything good, ready to go. Clips are all in place. Because if you don't have clips here and there holding everything in, and you let this nitrogen, things go crazy. Don't ask me how I know. So there we go. So now we're going to check our work, because the cool thing about this is that, so without the spring on here, we should be still able to push this down. And that's how you check it. You want to make sure that there's no air in here after all the bleeding. And again, we didn't use a pump, so, maybe we didn't get all the air out. That's all right. We can redo it if we need to. But what we can do is we're going to take this thing and push it on the ground, and we're going to push down and push it down and then flip it up. And if we feel any ticks or like hear anything like that, we'll know there's still air in there and we got to bleed it again. Push it all the way down. There we go. So it's tough because it's hard for me to show you guys. But when you push down and you flip it up, you watch this the shaft come up, And if there's any hesitations or like quick movements, there's still air in there. This one's good. There we go. So, feel pretty good about that. Shock's ready. Now we're going to clean the spring up, put it all back together. All right. So we got it ready to go. Gonna put the spring back on it. Now the thing is, you gotta remember a few little things, last little bits here before we sign off. Because this is plastic, you gotta make sure you get this steel washer on there. Because if you don't, this spring, when a shock compresses, the springs actually turn, right? They actually twist as they compress. And if it twists on that plastic, it'll just chew it up. So you put that on there. Then we go with the spring. Then we go with the other steel washer to protect the aluminum here. Boom. And got our last little clip. There we go. Up till it's tight, and then I will need to set the sag to make it perfect. But one of the kind of secrets to getting your shock, the sag correctly when you rebuild something is you want to tighten it, as long as you have the right spring. And I know this is the right spring for me, my weight, because I bought it, before. As long as you got the right spring and you're doing this, you tighten it. You should only need to put about 5 millimeters of preload on the spring, and that should get your sag really, really close. Now it may not be perfect, but that'll do it. As long as you got the right spring on there. So we're gonna get this. All right, there we go. So now we're gonna put 5 millimeters of preload. Gonna mark the threads. 5 millimeters up. 5 millimeters of preload. All right. Take our machinist rule here. See if we got 5 mil. Almost 5 mil. Just a tiny bit more. There we go. That ought to be right. It's kind of hard to see. You see the line right there. Machinist rule, come up here. And that is right at 5 mil. So, feel good about that. So, thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope that was informative. I hope that helps you get your shock done. If not, if you still have someone else do it, I hope that at least helps you understand kind of what's inside there and what's going on, and maybe why they charge so much to do it, because it is a fair amount of work. And got to make sure you do it right, otherwise you can mess things up. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be going through the forks, all the chassis bearings, all that stuff. If you haven't watched the original video of us taking Daisy apart, I'll put a link in the description for that, so check that out. Hope you guys have a great day. I hope you get out and spread the gospel of two wheels, and I really, 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 I really hope you go and ride your dirt bikes!